Most people picture the devil as a creature, horns, fire, a red face in the dark. But what if the devil is not a thing you see? What if the devil is a way you think? Because there is one psychological switch that can change a normal human into something colder, harder, and strangely powerful. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Today, I want to explore the psychology of the devil, not as a religion lesson, not as a horror story, but as a pattern. And the painting we're going to decode is not on a museum wall. It is painted inside the human mind. At first, this sounds like a conspiracy, secret societies, mind control, programming. But if we strip away the dramatic words, the core idea is simple. Human beings can be shaped, and sometimes they can be shaped into weapons. So, before we talk about mind control, we need to rewind, because the way we see reality has changed. Long ago, people moved from a mother goddess worldview to many gods to one single god, and with that shift, three big things changed in the human mind. First, people used to think mind came first, that the universe was like a giant mind that vibrates, and matter is what happens when those vibrations intersect. But now, we are taught the complete opposite. We are taught the brain creates the mind. And if that idea is wrong, even a little bit, what does that even mean? Second, people used to read the world like a metaphor, invisible forces, names for energies, gods as living symbols. Now it's all literal. If you can't measure it, you're told it is not real. Third, people used to trust intuition. They trusted the heart, the eyes, the feeling. Now we are trained to doubt our instincts and trust tools, data, and theory. And that creates a weird tension. Because humans are learning machines. We are built to learn. But learning feels painful when the lesson fights your instincts. Now, take that tension and scale it up. Imagine the first mass societies on Earth. China, the Indus Valley civilization, Mesopotamia, Egypt. When millions of people live together, the biggest problem is always the same: social control. How do you keep everyone in line? China used bureaucracy and exams. A whole civilization aimed its attention at one single goal: pass the test, become an official, gain stability. The Indus Valley built a religion that pushed peace and equality, and it became a prototype for later spiritual systems. Mesopotamia lived with constant war because the land had no natural defenses. And Egypt chose a human solution, the pharaoh, a living god at the center. And that's where the story turns real dark, because a pharaoh is still a human, not a real god. His life is always at risk. So here is the question: what does it actually take to be a great leader in a dangerous world? In school, you're taught a long list: wisdom, empathy, responsibility, respect. But the theory you shared is harsher. It says the leader who survived tend to share three traits. They are unpredictable, they tolerate extreme stress, and they lack empathy. And those three traits can be wrapped in one single word: dissociation. Dissociation is when your mind pulls away from your body. You're still inside your life, but you're watching it from a distance, like you're both actor and audience. And when you live like that, you become hard to read, hard to shake, hard to reach. It can look like power, but it can also look like evil. So now the devil starts to take shape, not as a monster, but as a mental state. A person who is cut off from feeling, a person who can harm without fully registering it. Now here is the hidden detail that changes everything. Egyptian mythology is strange if you read it like a story. It's repetitive, it is violent, it is full of humiliation, death and transformation, and it doesn't always flow like a normal myth. So what if it was not designed to be a story? What if it was designed to be a script? Something to be acted out, something that imprints itself into the mind. Think about the three main figures. Ra, the sun god, who fights the serpent every night to make the sun rise again. Osiris, the civilizing king, betrayed, trapped, cut apart. Horus, the child who returns to take the throne back through conflict and trial. If you stop seeing them as characters and start seeing them as roles, they look like three identities. Ra is the heroic self, Osiris is the helpless victim, Horus is the vengeful child. Hero, victim, avenger. Now, ask yourself something really simple. If you could push a ruler through intense ritual experiences, could you train him to switch between these roles? Could you make him act like three people in one single body? And if you could, who would control the switch? This is where the theory becomes really disturbing. It suggests the priests were the real power. The pharaoh was just the symbol, and the symbol needed to be stable, obedient, programmable. The method in this theory is trauma, because trauma doesn't just hurt you, trauma can split you. When the mind can't bear what is happening, it steps back, it dissociates, and once a person dissociates, identity becomes flexible. Now, add one more ingredient the theory mentions: ritual support. In the myth, Isis is the loyal, calming presence, the one who puts things back together. So, imagine the pharaoh going through fear and confusion, and the only comfort comes from a single figure, a voice, a mask, a rescuer. Over time, the pharaoh becomes dependent on that rescuer, and now, control becomes possible, not because of magic, because of attachment, because the mind grabs onto one thing that feels safe. The theory even suggests something like triggers, not spells, not fantasy, just cues. Smell, for example, different scents linked to different roles. So the setting itself becomes a switch. And honestly, we already live like this in a soft way. At school, you're one person. At home, you are another. At work, you shift again like a chameleon. Your environment activates a version of you. So the scary question is not, is the pharaoh unique? The scary question is, how programmable are we? Now the video pivots. Because the theory does not stop in ancient Egypt, it points at modern times and says, look, the same shape appears again. After 9/11, the war on terror begins. Prisons, interrogations, abuse, and leaked images from Abu Ghraib show people being humiliated in ways that feel designed to break the mind. Then the claim appears. Psychologists helped shape the program. A theory called learned helplessness gets mentioned. The idea that you can push a person into a state where they stop resisting, where the self collapses. And in this story, wait, this doesn't look like a random cruelty. This looks like a process. Then comes one of the biggest coincidences in the narrative: Isis, the name. The echo of Isis, the Egyptian rescuer figure. What if some modern systems don't just fail? What if they create chaos on purpose? Now, I need to say this clearly because it matters. Some of these claims are speculation, some are interpretive leap. But even if you ignore the politics, the psychological point still stands and lands. Extreme trauma can rewrite and rewire identity, and broken identity can be steered by whoever offers structure. This is how cults recruit. This is how abuse controls. That is how a frightened mind becomes loyal to the only thing that feels like relief. And then we get to MK Ultra, a program from the 1950s and 60s aimed at mind control research using drugs, hypnosis, and experiments. For a long time, it was treated like a myth. Then, it is framed as something that was later admitted in some form, even if much was destroyed. And from there, what if social media? What if mass education? What if mass psychology? If a society can shape attention, fear, desire, and identity, is that a softer version of programming? And then comes the big reveal, the main message this video should land on. The devil is not just doing bad things. The devil is dissociation. It's a split inside a person where empathy goes offline. It's the ability to hurt and not feel, to watch your life like a movie, and treat other people like objects inside that particular movie. And once you live that way, you can never feel real happiness, only tension, only misery. So you try to reduce your misery by making someone else feel smaller than you. That's the ugly loop. That's why evil spreads. Not because it is exciting, because it is numb. Now, let's end somewhere deeper. The story also brings up near-death experiences and the idea of a life review, a moment where you feel what you did to others, not as a rule, not as a punishment from the outside, but as a consequence of finally being unable to dissociate. And in that frame, heaven and hell are not places, they are states. Hell is finally feeling the pain you avoided. Heaven is finally seeing the good you forgot you were capable of. So here is the takeaway. If the devil is real, he doesn't need horns. He needs one single thing: for you to detach from your own heart. Because once you stop feeling, you stop resisting. And once you stop seeing others as real, anything becomes possible. So my question for you is really simple, and I want you to choose. Do you think evil is something people are born with, or do you think evil is something people are trained into? And is the devil a being, or is he a pattern that appears whenever humans learn how to disconnect?